The following is a presentation of the Radio Misfits Podcast Network.
From the birthplace of modern winemaking, Sonoma, California, welcome to The Winemakers. Local experts Sam Couture, Bart Hansen, and Brian Casey, along with host John Myers, invite you to listen in as they discuss all facets of winemaking. So sit back, pour yourself a glass, and let's hear what the guys have to say this week.
So that's from Bald Mountain, which was known as Bald Mountain. No,
Yeah.
That's what they call it?
I think so.
Yeah. It's like at the very end of
Wall Road.
Wall Road.
Yes.
Oh, the very end of Wall Road?
Yeah.
Yes.
That was
But it's in Sonoma.
Joe
but it's
Votek.
in Sonoma County.
Yeah,
Right.
Joe Votek farms
Votek
it.
used to farm that.
Used to farm it.
And you fall to the other side and you have the property of the Tesserons, the
Right, the-
the Robin Williams.
Yeah, now
Right.
owned by Pone Kane.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And then down below it is Montecito, because I know a guy that goes bike riding up there, and there's a road.
There's
Below.
a fire road.
There's a fire road.
Yes.
And so you can get from the end of the driveway at Montecito, you can get to Wall Road.
So you can
in
connect
5
from
minutes.
Nelligan Road to Wall Road, is
Yeah.
what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Mind
The,
blown.
the view is incredible. I do
Yeah.
that all the time.
Yeah.
It's an old fire road. Actually, it's kept in
it's-
good shape.
So
And
you
probably
have-
is not
right,
that old of a fire
you know
road. In
the-
fact, there
right,
was probably within the last 7 years
Yeah.
Do you know
some
the
fire
gate
equipment
coach?
on that road.
Yeah.
Oh, we'll have
Yeah.
to talk later. Off record.
Welcome to the Winemakers, everybody.
Yeah, I have. Lost complete control.
The inmates have taken over the asylum.
Right. Did we get a pour? We did get a pour.
I did a pour. I poured the Chardonnay from Bald Mountain. John on assignment.
John on assignment, and I just want to do a couple housekeeping things really quick. I just want to
Housekeeping to start the show. You prepped?
Hey, I just want to say thank you, because we had some great podcast listeners out last week that were out here visiting. I think some of them came and saw you, Bart, but we had Abby Rappel and then Bill and Pam Harkins who came out and were
From Texas.
yeah. And
Great.
Bill said
And the heart and the repels are from
South Dakota.
South Dakota, yeah.
Mid-
And they have been,
Another one of the hardest states in the world to ship to.
They had a
I don't know
cool
what you're talking about.
itinerary going though, Bart. When they
did
told me
have
where
a-
they were going, I was
Yeah.
like, dope. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, they were well thought out and had it planned.
It was the full. It was the full Winemakers podcast travel agency.
Plus.
Yeah.
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 But Bill mentioned, he said, I think he said it to you, but I overheard him. He said, yeah, will you guys turn up your microphones? And so I want to just throw this out there. We are not sponsored. We have no idea what we're doing.
We're
We use different
self-produced.
equipment, different microphones. We're in different regions. We are not paid to do this, but if anyone would like to sponsor us, and you don't care what we do, when
Buy
we
us a
do it, or
producer,
how
please.
we do it, and you are culturally aligned with us, and you want to just buy us some podcast equipment, we are completely down. Give us the full setup, and we will mention you on the podcast every week.
We promise not to make fun of you at all.
Right.
Right. Which is exactly why we've never had a sponsor.
Right. At least not more, like no longer than a week.
Right.
Get one episode of sponsor.
And at that point, we welcome Rodrigo.
Oh, hey,
Soto.
Rodrigo.
Hey, guys.
Thanks for
Thank you for
being
having
here.
me. Appreciate it.
Well, and I want to mention,
Buckling up.
I want to mention a couple things. Last night, I was at a really nice dinner up on Moon Mountain at the Keene Estate, and had some great food and some really fun wines. The Scribe is doing a sparkling mission that, normally when you have sparkling red wines, they can, it's hit or miss, but this one was really pretty.
Was it actually red color?
Yes. And then the standout of the night, once again, was the 2019 Rossi Ranch Zinfandel from Carlisle. That I remember we tried out at Rossi Ranch that day when everyone was out there, and it still is just blowing minds. And then it made me think of this, was it Sonoma magazine that just dropped with the iconic vineyards in Sonoma.
Yeah.
Rossi Ranch was listed in there. And I think, Bart, you were
I got a nice
under
plug.
the winemakers that was pulling fruit from Rossi Ranch.
Yeah, it was a nice plug.
Yeah.
16600 was mentioned. And who was the third wine?
Was it Abbott's Passage?
Maybe it was.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a nice plug. So thank you to Sonoma Magazine. The whole article was nice.
Tried this yet?
Oh, I mean,
not this vintage, no.
So Rodrigo, you captured that thing that people keep talking about capturing in Chardonnay, and that little bit of reductiveness, interest in the nose. It's
Zip,
zip.
zap.
Yeah, I haven't tasted it.
pizzazz.
I'm just I've done is smelt it at this point.
The mid palate fucking still blowing me away. It's like going forever.
And it's funny, as I say that, I watched Rodrigo, and I was fortunate enough. I got to work with Rodrigo for a while when he first started working. That was your first job in California? No, you worked for
It was
Ken.
my first serious job. Yeah, for sure. I did some internships before, but that was 2006, Bart.
But what I remember about you more than anything else, Rodrigo, is how thoughtful you were.
Thank you.
That's why I asked. It's such a Brian Chardonnay.
Fucking great.
No, thank you.
Yeah, Rodrigo Soto, everyone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was a great show. Thanks for tuning in.
And both thoughtful and consideration for what you're doing, but also looking forward to how it's going to affect the end product.
Yeah. Yeah, no, thank you, Bart. Thank you for the intro, and thank you guys for having me. And starting with this Chardonnay, it's that flintiness that it has. It's, in my opinion, is that element of the rock component of the mountains over here that is very, very distinct, very particular. And in my opinion, this is a dry farm vineyard. Dry farm Chardonnay that it blew my mind when I saw it for the first time, see that it was available, and at the same time getting that salinity, that flintiness, all those elements that are in the wine, which obviously has very little intervention in the winemaking because it doesn't need much. I was very, very excited, and this is how my journey as a producer started. I always have worked for somebody, but this is the first time that I'm doing it for myself with my wife, and
So
I cannot be more.
Was what?
2019.
Okay. And was the first Chardonnay from this ranch?
Yes,
Okay.
we have been making wines there for the last 5 years.
And so for our listeners, we're tasting the 2021.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and we started the show talking about where the vineyard was in our sort of like cryptic local language of it. It's the elevation, 1,800 feet.
Yeah.
And it's Sonoma Valley on the label, but that's only because somehow when we drew the line, it didn't go far enough north.
The line needs to be drawn somewhere.
Well,
And I think that it's funny because when you take that road, Sam, to your left, it's Sonoma. To your right is Napa.
Because you access, as we're saying, so Wall Road essentially is a Napa County road,
Right.
that shoots off of the Oakville grade,
Correct.
on the backside of the mountain.
Yeah.
And you take this, and it goes and the way the county line is drawn in. I don't know if this is everywhere, but at least between Sonoma and Napa, it's a watershed thing.
It is.
So if you drop of water, it's going to run into the Napa River, it's Napa County. If it's going to go to the Sonoma Creek, it's Sonoma County.
Yeah.
So you must go around the sort of the ridge
Yes,
to get to this site,
exactly.
and it's volcanic. I mean, you can tell.
Well, and
it's
if
volcanic soil, right?
100%.
So it's essentially a Moon Mountain district. But we drew the line. When we drew the line, we didn't know Rodrigo was going to move from Napa and come over here to Sonoma, and we would have done it differently.
Well, but
years ago.
again, the question is then, if it is Sonoma Valley, why isn't it Moon Mountain?
It's in a gray area. And we have talked with Phil about this because definitely, I think at the time when you guys were figuring this out in terms of the appellation, you need the collaboration of certain growers and them to agree that they want to be part of this or not.
Right.
And I think that there was something lost in translation there, and they're not part, but they are at the elevation and they're in that section of the mountain. So it tastes like
It tastes like it.
definitely.
I mean, the Chardonnay, the great Chardonnay that Kistler made, and I think they still make it from that vineyard.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
less than a mile from this probably.
Less than that. I mean,
And-
you're 10 minutes walking.
Right.
Yeah.
And then the Chardonnay that we made, the Charlie Smith and Biaggi made it from there.
Yep.
It has that. There's it's obvious. It's the same fault line. That like and you said it, the way that it captures those rocks, that like basaltic.
Oh my God. Yeah.
So when I said that aromatic that some people say reduced,
Yeah.
this is coming naturally, as you're saying, from where it's grown. And I think of some people that try to do that, but they do it in how they use sulfur in the wine. So it's much more heavy-handed winemaking.
It can be definitely manipulated, but the whole point, I think that when you look at the soils over here, and this is kind of has been a fun path, like working with people that are very focused in soils. I remember taking this trip to many years ago with Pedro Parra to Burgundy, for example, and we end up talking with Marc Colin. That's the dropping name thing. Yeah. With Marc Colin, which is
With
a great
all due
producer.
respect.
Yeah. And I think that was very interesting to smell that flintiness in the wines, specifically from Saint-Aubin. And always called my attention, like, and can you get that? And he said, absolutely. This comes with the grapes. I mean, you cannot fabricate it.
Right.
So, and what is the rest of the process? No, always try to, and as you know, some countries really engage with the lease contact. Some other countries or winemakers disregard the lease. I think the lease, when it comes from the right place, is golden. And I think that you treat it correctly. You work with the wine, you let it oxidize through the process, and you get a little bit of that. Now, a touch is nice. When you overdo it, it's overwhelming. But I think that the other component is the bright acidity. It's all natural coming from the place, and fully adapted. When you see dry farm vineyards that are kind of thriving, not struggling, but thriving, living on top of rock, in my opinion, that's something special about those sites.
And when was this vineyard planted?
It's originally, there's an older section from 1972. I get a little bit of that it's in this wine. And the other section was renovated in 2005.
And isn't there also Zinfandel up there?
There's a Zin.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a bowl, so it's definitely collects the water from the rainfall through the.
And what I was going to say, Sam, is about the road is that where you pick up Wall Road, you've already come down off the ridge
a ways.
Yeah. So not only do you have to get out and around an area, but you also go up in elevation again.
You probably climb up another 700-800 feet.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So it's been a cool treat.
Yeah.
To work with those grapes.
So should we do a little biographical?
I was going to say, some people, if you don't know Rodrigo, some people might, like Bart, know him from Benziger. Some people, like myself, from Quintessa and Far Mountain. But yeah, I mean, I think, tell us a little bit about, I mean, you obviously have an accent, so we figure you're from somewhere.
Definitely still there. And I think it's going to stay there forever. But it's
Fresno? Is that where that is?
a little farther south. I mean, I'm originally from Chile, and I grew up there, born and raised, very proudly, and I started my career there. And when I started, it was kind of a funny moment, because I study agronomy in one of the universities down there, and I was, I will say, below average student in terms of grades. And at the time, in order to get graduated, you have to make a research work and a thesis. And the subject was assigned based on your grades. And as my grades were fairly poor, I get the leftover subject. And the leftover subject was about organic farming.
No way.
And that's when I start and cross my path with organic farming for the first time. And the research work.
So it wasn't on your menu, on your radar at that point?
Absolutely not. I was trained scientifically, and the classic conventional farming. I find my path to winemaking and viticulture through studying all that, but I'd never heard about organic farming before. This was this was late 90s. And my research was done in the only 2 acres of organically farmed grapes by a winery at the time named Kramer. And the winemaker there his name was Alvaro Espinoza. And it happens that Kramer was imported to the US by Brown and Forman. Brown and Forman at the time used to own Fetzer. And Alvaro, at the end of my thesis, and I did my first internship with him, he connected me with Paul Dolan. And I did a long internship in Hopland.
Paul Dolan.
Yeah, great man. And
Alvaro should get a...
Absolutely. Alvaro is a great guy, still very close friend. And Paul opened the doors to me at the time. Not a lot of interns. That was not a common thing to do at the time. And I lived in this trailer under a tree in Hopland for the following 8 months, learning about organic farming, what they were doing. They were leading the pack at the time, and also working at the winery. And at that time, I connect with a gentleman that was many times. Yeah, prepare the glasses. It was many times showing people around. And this was this guy with the white hair, with the long ponytail, and with a very funny accent. Yeah. And his name was Alan York. And Alan, we connect. He asked me who I was, where I was coming from. Long story short, he invited me for dinner. We connect very well. We become friends. And then my time was done after 8 months. I moved to New Zealand to do another internship. And when I was in New Zealand, I remember getting a phone call from Jimmy Fetzer that he was starting a little project with Alvaro Espinoza as his consultant, Alan York in the viticulture, and they were interested in making some wine that year. So I came back and worked at Santiago Wine Garden for another vintage, and I connect more with Alan. We become close friends, and then it was time for me to go back to Chile. And in Chile, I started working my first serious job with an incredible family. It's a Croatian last name. His name is Matetic, and they were starting a project in a new appellation, a coastal appellation, and they were growing some cool climate Syrah, some Pinot Noir, some Sauvignon Blanc, in the coast of San Antonio. I present them myself and how I would like to work. I did at the time a slideshow with what I have seen in California with all the organic farming techniques and biodynamics. They really liked it. And they asked me, who can we get so that we can implement all those techniques? And that's when we brought Alan York for the first time to Chile. And for the first time, we brought biodynamics to the country.
Wow. What year was that?
That was 2001.
2001.
Oh. So Alan was very instrumental for me in many, many different ways. We get the chance to work with him for 2 or 3 weeks per year. As he was traveling and starting to be known, the project was very successful. It gave me incredible exposure.
Were all available here in the States.
They were.
Yeah.
They are until today. And at a certain point, after 6 years, I realized that I was becoming the limiting factor for the project. I need to keep learning and educating myself. I felt that I was not contributing enough. My team was doing excellently well. We built a winery, we expanded the vineyards, we certified the property. And I decided that I was going to do something else. Wasn't clear yet, but I resigned and made a long transition of 6+ months. And on Alan's last visit, I mentioned to him that I was planning to do something else. And he looked at me, and actually I was inviting him to a project that I was considering to work in the north of the country. And I looked at him, and I mentioned that I resigned, that I was doing this transition, and that I was interested in working with him. And he realized that. He looked at me and said, Rodrigo, I'll be very happy to do that. But what if you come and work with the Benzigers? And I said, like, how come? Well, because Mike is restructuring the company. They are doing some changes, and I think that you may be a good fit. And that's how he introduced me to Mike Benziger. And we have a sequence of really anecdotal encounters with Mike. We connect very well. And that's how in 2006, I was just married. I got the opportunity to come with my wife for the first time to a serious job and working in California. It was an incredible opportunity for myself.
And how old were you?
Right now?
No, then.
32.
Yeah.
32 years old. I was very young, and at the same time getting the opportunity now to work with Alan twice a week.
Yeah.
Every week of the year. So we spend a lot of time together. We were developing properties in Bodega Bay. We were farming all over. At the time, the Benzigers were developing a program named Farming for Flavors, that they were trying to expand the sustainability, organic, and biodynamics at every level. And that's where I get the chance to meet your father and work with Phil. At least in 5 or 6 different properties, and meeting all this.
We sold a lot of grapes to the Benzigers
At the time. I'm sure, and that was but the meeting all these people at the time that were so committed to this way of farming. So for me, that was clear. That was the right way of doing it.
Yeah.
That was a very futuristic way of farming.
And the thing about Alan is Alan came from a vegetable and tree background. Like,
Right.
he didn't come from grape growing. He came from that other sort of farming. So he didn't have preconceived notions to what grapes were supposed to be like. I mean, he certainly did. He learned over the years working with the Fetzers and whatnot. But in general, he was always based in growing things. Plants.
He was connected to nature like no other person that I probably will ever met.
Yeah.
Because he knew plants like nobody else. And you're very right, Bart. He looked at plants and he looked how they coexist in between plants. Yeah. And he said, that plant doesn't have anything to do there. This is not part of that ecosystem, or that plant is living there because the soils have this and that characteristic. I have never seen that way of connecting. And Alan's background was remarkable because when he left, he was from the South. He was from Louisiana. And when he left his home at a very early stage, he was illiterate. Yeah. And he learned from, he was drafted in the late 60s. He hitchhiked to California. He was drafted in the late 60s. He refused to participate in the Vietnam War. And he was assigned to do community service at the Santa Cruz University, planting the botanical gardens out there. And
great botanical garden, by the way, if you have a chance to go down there.
Under the hand of Alan Chadwick.
Yeah.
And Alan Chadwick he was from a wealthy family. He had as a tutor Rudolf Steiner.
Wow.
So he learned from first lineage,
the through line,
and it was incredible because Alan he was quite a character. You never met him.
I don't remember having met him. I mean,
he has such.
It really was in college. I think it was big part of it. I had kind of the biodynamic thing happened after I went to Reno and was living a decidedly unbiodynamic life.
He was funny how he explained. He said, "Rodrigo, I didn't know even how to read. But what I remember that religiously, I have my stamp of LSD every morning. And the only thing that I remember was plants. And I learned about plants just looking at them and picturing them and what they like, what they didn't like, the type of soils, and all the aspects that Alan Chadwick was teaching him."
Tuned in.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Tuned into the plants.
Yeah.
What was your position when you came up here at Benziger? Like what?
I was.
Are you kidding me? They handed him the keys and told him he could do anything he wanted.
No.
I was a winemaker, director of winemaking. Yeah.
Okay.
That was the position, and
so they handed you the keys and told you that you could do whatever you wanted.
well, there were a lot of cooks in the kitchen. I mean, no question about that. But
So the director of winemaking, there was a winemaker.
There was a lot of cooks in the kitchen because there's family.
Yeah.
And then the way Benziger was run, because it was 3 different facilities and you had people managing each of those facilities.
What's the third facility?
It was called BBC, Benziger Barrel Cellar. And so out in Sebastopol and Gravenstein, there was 20,000 barrels out there, 15,000 barrels out there.
15,000.
And they would run their own, like they didn't see grapes, but they would receive juice and ferment. All the Chardonnay was all done out there, and all the barrel aging was done out there. And so each facility had its own crew, which was specific to that. And then it had someone who ran it who had responsibilities, and it had been raised on one set. And then all of a sudden things changed. Mike came more into the fold.
Yeah.
You were brought in to kind of help us all figure it out.
Yeah.
And how to make it work more cohesively.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. No, it was a lot of responsibilities, and it was a lot of work, but we were motivated by the best. I mean, if we, working with Mike was such a school of hard work or ethics, incredible, and leading, and as Bart said, leading, working with brothers and sisters, and leading the pack in an impeccable way, in many different ways. I mean, it was a big example for me to see somebody like him that worked as hard and so well inspired all the time, very positive, very thoughtful as well.
Well, weren't they the first Demeter certified biodynamic property in California?
Maybe in Sonoma County. Okay. Jim Fetzer's vineyard Ciego and one of his siblings,
right,
I think, were certified. But in Sonoma County,
and they were contemporaries. I mean, with the Fetzers, so definitely. So that was a big experience for me, and from being kind of thinking about organics and biodynamics as a cool thing, I could prove. Because at Benziger, you have the opportunity to work with conventional, with organic, and with biodynamic grapes and see the outcome in the wines. And that was very easy to understand that it was not only a cool thing to do, but the best quality grapes make the best wines. I mean, no question about that.
You'd see it in the vineyards, but you would also see it in the winery as it was fermenting.
In the wines.
Healthier ferments, better results on the wine.
There was no doubt that the farming that had the most focus and attention were the best fermentations.
Right.
Right.
Well, that was the estate fruit, but then also was it the De Coelho vineyard?
Yes,
exactly. As well out there at the coast. De
Coelho was being developed, and with Alan we took over that property. Dave Comer was farming it, but at the very end it needed a little more direction, and we start making the first wines out of there. And also we created a lineup of vineyard designates in Green Valley and a lot of different properties that we start transforming to organics and biodynamics. So that and at that time, and I'll connect the rest of my story, I mean that it's at that time my wife was working for a Chilean brand named Veramonte that was owned by the Huneenus family, based on the offices of Quintessa.
Yeah.
So as I was working for Benziger, my wife was working for the Huneenuses, and that's how I met them. And when we decided to go back to Chile in 2012, we thought that this was the most wonderful chapter that we could ever imagine. And it was time for us to close the chapter. We wanted to grow our family. We wanted to be closer to the rest of our families. And we decided to go back. And through that process, I talked with Augustine Sr., about my plans, and he invited me to work with Veramonte at the time. So in 2012, I started working for the Huneenuses when I went back to Chile. And we did some very cool things down there, because my only quote-unquote condition to him was that if we're going to work together, I would like to implement organic and biodynamic farming techniques in the vineyards.
Now, had Quintessa already moved towards that at that point?
They were practicing it, but they were not certified or anything, but they have strong beliefs in it. The Chilean project was very different. So I arrived to a vineyard and a property that I'll be kind. I think that it was, at least to say, depressed, and the winery and the vineyard were unionized for different reasons. So I never confront that situation before.
So what is that? How is that different from a normal vineyard when you have it unionized? What does that mean exactly?
Well, it means that at the very end, I think that, in my opinion, it turned out to be a positive thing, because many times, and we start changing the standards of the region, Brian, when I was a kid studying at university, I remember that my professors mentioned that the comparative advantages of Chile was two of them: climate and cheap labor.
Mm.
When you think about that today,
Yeah.
saying that, you gotta, as a professor, you gotta add some guts to say that, because definitely that could not be an advantage to anybody. Right. So things happen in agriculture, and obviously you realize that there's a lot of work to do in terms of leveling the field. Yeah. So for me, I have a great relationship with the union, which I never expect, because I was warm and close to them, and I really tried to understand the needs. So that was very challenging for me at the beginning. Never expect to have those kind of conversations. And on the other hand, we transform 1,600 acres into organics and biodynamics in the course of 5 years.
That's a big ding.
That changed the statistics in the country.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you that.
15%, Sam.
Wow.
It improved. And that makes me very proud, because as you all know, without the collaboration of your team, without the collaboration of your people, it's impossible to do any kind of changes like that. The wines got better. We created new lines. We bring the morale back to the winery, and I think we became back on track and back to be competitive, and not only competitive but attractive. And that's how, unfortunately, they decided to sell the winery to a Spanish group in 2016. And I remember that the main attractiveness, this is González Bias, the Tío Pepe family. And I remember that they were very attracted to the project. They were shopping for a long time around the country. They wanted to expand their frontiers, and Chile was the country that they decided where they wanted to invest. And they shopped for a long time, and they saw Veramonte, and they really liked it because of its farming techniques. And they thought, this is the farming of the future. These guys are doing the right thing. I remember when the board arrived to the winery, and we were in these conversations, and the CEO took me aside. He was an Argentinian guy. He said, Rodrigo, there are 12 board members here, and we're going to make the decision tonight after your presentation. The vote today is split 6-6. And I want really this to happen, but it's up to you.
Wow.
At the end of the night, they decide to buy the winery 11-1.
Wow, nice.
It was a very cool moment, because at the very end you realize that they were very engaged with the concept and what they wanted to see, and once they see it, they believe it, and I hope they're very happy with their decision. I did that.
Are they still farming it?
Yeah, of course, and that became kind of the driver of the concept of the brand. And I did that transition for 2 years. I really enjoyed. I learned a lot of things. Transitions are never easy. They take a lot of discussion, politics, and other things that I'm not very good at. But definitely, it ended up working fine. And in 2018, I got a phone call from Agustin Francisco, Agustin Senior's son, and the phone call he asked me if I was interested in coming back to California, and I said, yeah, sure, but to do what? I mean, we're expanding, we're growing, and we would like you to take over Quintessa. When I thought, oh, that's very neat. I mean, I'm very interested, but I needed to talk with my wife. At that time, we have 2 young girls. We look at them, perfect timing. And we thought, what a cool experience will be for them to have our experience that we had a few years back, and expose them to a different culture, a different environment, and see what happens. So we took the decision very quickly, and we moved over here. My wife started working for Faust, one of the Huneenus brands, as their marketing director, and I started working for Quintessa as their general manager.
General manager, meaning you were...
That was an interesting concept, because at the very end, they call it state director. And I thought at the beginning that, Brian, to be fairly honest, you think that, hey, this script is already written and there's not much that you can do. But when you start looking a little bit under the rug and you realize that there was a lot of things that we could do in order to improve quality, farming, presence, a lot of things. So, and we end up inviting people that, you know, the resources were generous in terms of bringing good knowledge. So we end up engaging with Pedro Parra, that I think was interesting, but with Simonetta and Cirque, that it was a chapter that we thought we were fully graduated, that was completely checked. That box was completely checked, and it was embarrassing. I mean, when we start learning from them, they're like all the crazy things that we have been doing in the past, and it was very refreshing. We brought.
Can you speak a little bit to that?
Yeah, and we're gonna get one of those guys on the show.
Yeah.
Oh, they're incredible.
Eventually.
Yeah.
But because you're absolutely right. The people who were master pruners,
completely never seen before.
The best pruners you'd ever see on an Enterprise Vineyards crew, the things that they've learned in the last how long, 5 or 6 years that we've been, maybe longer, with the Simone and Search.
And what I'm hoping that you could at least touch base on what it was that you weren't doing correctly, or maybe it's better to say that you changed.
Bart, I think that there are a couple of things, but first of all, the way that they do their diagnostic, it's very educational, because when they bring the chainsaw, and I think that it's kind of very showy how they do this dissection of the vines, but basically for the first time, it's like looking at an X-ray of a vine, and you see it, and you see where the problem started. And normally where the problem started is where you prune with a lopper or with a saw, or you did the wrong cuts, or you're doing basically the wrong interpretation. So we were utilizing techniques that we have learned in other places, oversimplify them and applying them without any thoughtfulness. And the beauty of these people, or these guys, that they speak a language that is very similar to biodynamics without being them. But they talk about the subflow, they talk about the plant with a level of respect that I have never seen before. And then you start, if you put yourself, it's funny because they ask you, hey, Rodrigo, if you want to learn this, you got to feel and think like a vine. I remember years past being with Pedro Parra in a pit, and he was grabbing the roots in this white ash soils that were very drying. And he asked me, you need to feel these roots, feel them. You need to feel and think like a root to understand these soils.
I like that.
So when you start talking with people that they have nothing to do with biodynamics, but it's a very similar frequency, it's a very similar language.
My favorite definition of biodynamic farming is the best way of listening to what's going on in your farm, whether it's a vineyard or whatever. That ability to listen and see and feel what's happening out there. One of the things I love about the Simonite and Search methods, and Bart, you've been in vineyards, for how many ever years in California. The conventional wisdom of like cutting things close to the trunk.
Oh my
like
God,
making clean cuts and not leaving little stumps out there because it doesn't look good, because it wasn't aesthetically pleasing.
Yeah.
That was damaging deeper into the vine than you needed to be damaging. So you leave, and it's just like it's a half an inch.
Right.
Yeah. And in the old days it would have been cut down, clean to the trunk.
Right.
And you leave that, and all of a sudden the sap flow, the life of this vine doesn't have something in its way, on its way to your fruit and to your leaves. Right. It's just like, it's so intuitive when you get into it, and get rid of the conventional wisdom of 50, 100 years of since the loppers were invented.
Well, right,
Since the shears were invented, that's how it.
Which was all to do it to make it look clean and neat, to go along with no weeds.
Well, and there's the thought that like if you
vine.
had dead wood out there, that it was a place that disease would enter.
Right.
But it turns out doing it the way that we were doing it was inviting more disease deeper in.
Right.
Than
you
like
have those
freeway to it.
Those moments that you're out there, and I was talking with Marco, and he said like same conversation, Sam, and he looked at me and said, "What is more important for you, the wires and the posts, or your plants?" That's a very easy answer, man. Right there. But we tend to privilege the infrastructure over the living things because we are looking at our plants like an engine, and we can just replace parts in and out. It's not an engine, it's a living organism. And when you start thinking like that you need to create the space for it to grow, it's like wearing the same size shirt for all your life. Obviously, that's not going to work. So, of course, you need to grow with the times, and the trellis is the shirt. Yeah. And you just need to make it fit for whatever the needs are. And I think that all those elements, we have some beautiful moments together with Marco. After 4 or 5 years, when you see, it's like the guys are dancing with the plants. When they already learned the techniques, he pulled me aside. He said, "Rodrigo, look at them. They're not workers anymore. They're sculptors."
Yeah.
I thought it was so cool. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So things like that you get the chance to work with people like that, and you see the improvements. You see that your blogs start performing better. We commit to certification. That was not done before. I think was very important. We have a lot of conversations 100%. With the ownership. Hey, in nowadays, you got to be legit. I mean, for me, certifications, I may agree or disagree. I mean, certain things, I think they're important. I think you gotta walk the talk. Yeah. You cannot just say things.
Totally.
So
big ding on that one too.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's the Gong Show with Rodrigo.
And I remember being out at that Quintessa property. I used to work with Richard and Andrea Visconti.
Yeah, yes, that's
and
right.
They were a great catering company that was really smart about hiring fine dining servers on our days off and paying us really well and feeding us really well.
Yeah.
And we would do a lot of the parties out there at the home, and then do dessert on the little island out there, and they'd always give us wine.
It's a beautiful property, and it's stunning. I mean, it's one of the it's spectacular. So anyway, that has been part of my story. And in 2019, when right after we moved here with my wife, we thought, we have think about doing our own wines for a long time. But being in Chile is very tricky because you have to export. I mean, or the domestic consumption is very limited. And we thought,
can you talk about that a little bit? Like I was curious about how much wine out of that 1,600 acres you were talking about, how much of the wine was actually consumed domestically in country, and how much was shipped out?
It's 5, maybe 10% in country, depending on the winery. The rest, I mean, Chile is an exporting country of wine. The domestic consumption, differently from Argentina, for example, that they have a massive internal consumption. We're way smaller as a country, as a population, and part of the culture has been wine is growing, but not at the rate that wineries have been producing. So they mostly export to all over the world. Yeah. So we have an exporting mentality. We have been always an exporting country, normally for commodities, not necessarily for brands. And I think that's the next step for the wine industry, that you need to create value. I think it's very important to create brand equity and value to what you do, rather than sell the juice. That's not going to cut it in the long term.
No.
That's not right, in my opinion, fundamentally wrong. But at the same time, it's a process. So that's where we are as a country. So when we moved here, Brian, I mean, I think this was very high in our list. But how to do it, where to do it? Well, what I learned from my previous experiences, and I remember Bart used to make his own wine at the time, and it was very common to make your own, and it was accepted. From where I come from, it's very improper to do that because your time belongs to your employer. And I think here is not that different, but at the same time, I will say that there's always room for doing a few cases on your own. I think that's totally accepted. And the infrastructure is there. You have custom crush, you have relationship with growers, and you can start something if you have the energy, the time, and the resources. And we did. We at the time we asked for permission as well, just to be in check with that. And we start our little project, which was way more exciting than what I expect. And the kind of self-realization that I got making these wines was something that I have never felt before. It was something that gave me incredible satisfaction and pride. So I was very, very excited and really enjoying it and connecting certain dots because I re-engaged conversations with Phil. I re-engaged in conversations with Chewy. And I start re-engaging with the people that I have met before. And you realize this, Mike Benziger always used to say, I mean, the power of relationships. This business is about relationships. And I start really understanding that when you have done the right thing, I mean, I think that you knock the doors and people help you in many different ways. I mean, Ken Bernard as well, helping me setting up and pointing me where we should be doing the wines, and he's helping me making the wines as well. So stuff like that you realize that when you are in the right company, there's no limits. I mean, I think that you're self-limiting yourself only, but it's no limits. I mean, this is the place where to do it, and we're very excited about it.
So, and for our listeners, a lot of times we have people on that aren't in the broad market, aren't out there across America. So we're telling you to go to their website and purchase wine, which you can certainly do with Rodrigo.
Yep.
But I think the other thing to know is that there are states where you can find your wines. Can you share some of that, like what states you're in?
Definitely. We're represented.
Can we pour some Cabernet?
Yeah. We're represented by and this was the other part of this, Bart, that again, through when we were in 2019 thinking about bottling the first wine, there was a friend, and we met this person. We met this person from both ends. I met him through Mike Benziger. His name is Mike. He was a very good friend of Mike Benziger. His name is Michael Quintessa. And also my wife, when we moved back to Chile, she works for a winery named Erasmus. And the same person, friend of Mike, was importing the wines from Erasmus. So my wife know him as well. And the company that he owns is named Vintus. And when in 2019, we heard that Michael Quintessa was in town, and we invite him for dinner. And we have a beautiful, beautiful conversation. And I told him about our project. And at the end of the dinner, he looked at us. He said, "You know what? It's funny. I mean, I'm over here looking at a project with very similar characteristics that you are mentioning. If you ever materialize and make it happen, I'll be very happy to represent you." And for us, that was a very important moment in time, because obviously that was the part that we could have not figured out without somebody helping us sell the wine. As you guys know, we really enjoy making this, spending time in the sites, but without the help in the market, which is where the real jungle is. It's very, very challenging.
And to be able to do it with someone with his experience in that book, as opposed to a massive book with 2,000 wines.
Correct.
That's
awesome. Correct.
You're going to the right places.
Yeah.
Well, how did you decide on? So, what did you want to do with this brand? What was the goal?
Brian, they came very organically in terms of finding Bald Mountain and Gold Ranch, the one that is in the label here. They, in my opinion, they were both sites that, because they were dry farm, they're sites that are not manicured. In my opinion, both of them there were downlooked. And you know what? That was exactly what I was looking for, to create the opportunity of finding places that has been misinterpreted in the past and where I see a great potential. So it happens organically in the sense that I would start knocking doors in different places and see what was available. And it happened that in the Moon Mountain area, which I have worked before, I find that we have these places, and then you connect with the elevation, and then you realize that where we come from, the mountain is a very important character in the scene. In Santiago, you live at 1,600 feet. So basically, the mountain is something that has been there for me all my life. The far has a little bit of nostalgia about being afar from where we are, but all these places have that too. There's no neighbors. You don't look at the other side of the fence to see another vineyard. Right. There's nothing there. It's surrounded by nature. So all those concepts, and this was my wife that thought, we should call it Far Mountain. I mean, something that has that resemblance of remoteness, uniqueness, and also nostalgia. And then realizing that Moon Mountain, in my opinion, when we start making the wines, I think has an incredible potential. And there's people that are doing some really good wines, but I think like everything in life, you need a lot of good neighbors to create a neighborhood.
Yeah.
And I think that needs to be like that. The collaboration is essential. Where I come from, if you don't collaborate, you don't win, because nobody wins. Yeah. I think that the opportunity is here in places like Moon Mountain that are also defined by its geological boundaries. Every appellation in the New World is defined by political boundaries that doesn't have anything to do with wine or place or anything. This is an appellation with sense of place. Yeah. And I think that's incredibly valuable.
Good. I remember the first time I heard, I don't know when, because I remember putting the Chardonnay on the list at the Fairmont, and I don't know if I met with you, but I remember the description of the brand was, these are vineyards that you're not going to see from the road.
Yes, that's very true.
I was like,
very true.
Yeah, I don't know what road to see them from.
Yeah, it's like most people aren't going to look at these grapes.
It might not be a paved road,
right?
Yeah,
you might be on a road and you might see it for a moment.
Yeah.
Cab's delicious.
Thank you.
It's
and it's a blend,
very complete one
of 2 or 3 different vineyards.
Yeah, mostly Gold Ranch, and in the 2021 is what that vineyard behind the Bartolomeo Park. That was Casper. That you have to go through the park to get back there. So it has a little bit of that.
Casper.
Desnudos, I think that they call those. Yes.
Yeah, because I got that only 1 year.
Right.
I got that fruit. Yeah.
Yeah. Then they changed ownership or something happened. Yeah.
Well, it became owned by the family that should just be calling the 4-letter word.
Right.
The Matsons.
Right. So you know that the controversial family here in Sonoma that was buying all the properties.
Oh, I didn't know about that. Yeah.
They bought that.
Okay. I didn't get too political where we just did one of those political episodes, but
Yeah.
It did make the Wall Street Journal last week, if you saw.
Yeah.
I'll look for it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's unraveling.
It's we'll make a great movie one day, or at least a book.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Rodrigo, will you talk about winemaking with both of these wines? I mean, barrel stuff and like what?
It's it's very basic winemaking in my opinion, and the older I get in terms of learning the process, I try to put way more emphasis on the farming and understanding the places rather than trying geeky techniques. I think that it's the red is an open top fermentation, and try to be gentle but not overly gentle. And barrel wise, we're trying to use a moderate amount of new oak for multiple reasons. I think it's so easy to overpower the tannins with wood, so I try to keep it low and not for too long. The other things that I have I've been questioning myself for many, many years now is about the aging processes. And are we utilizing the right amount of time? Are we utilizing the right formats and elements like that? So this is just 1 year old program. So we don't age the wines for longer than 12 months. And I prefer the bottle to do its part. And percentage of new oak is always below 30% new oak. And for those wines that I was mentioning from in the future, from the Nannery or from Montecillo or from Monterroso, I'm planning to do a little bit of what people do in the Piedmont, a year in barrel and second year in foudre, so that it integrates well, so that we don't abuse the overpowering of the oak, but enhance the integration of the grapes and the flavors and the tannins.
And is some of that to help advance the wine for when it goes to bottle?
Definitely, because those tannins are a little more scratchy in that sense. So I think that it needs a little extra time, but to get the wine more rested.
It's just great freshness.
Yeah. And going back to the flavors, it was funny because I did some research with the Gold Ranch, for example, which is, it's not the most good-looking ranch. I understand that because the terraces go with the topographic lines, so they're completely different. And some of the vines are dying, some of them are with viruses. But I remember talking with the person that was making the wines from there before. I said, I didn't like it because there's a little hints of greenness and the tannins are a little scratchy and this, and that was exactly what I wanted. So a person that didn't like it for that, I thought, we can work with that and we can take advantage of those characteristics and show them nicely. Yeah. So
it's interesting, it sort of like completes the bowl for me as far as that little section of Moon Mountain District, which came in directly across Moon Hollow to the southwest or southeast. Rapri, Moon Mountain Vineyard, to the northwest, and then the Simon's Vineyard, which is down at the bottom of that valley. There's and obviously the Moon Mountain District tasting would be a place to do this, but we should probably do it in a formal setting, sit down and have those 4 or 5 wines that I just said to see the through lines and the differences, because geologically they're part of the same sort of timeline and geologic events, but they have you kind of have the full spectrum of that caldera and the different exposures and the way the different rocks settled, and because there's definitely a through line, but it's definitely different also.
And age of the vines, Sam, I think that is so important, man. I mean, that is something that we never speak enough. I mean, when you work with older vines that are 40, 50 years old, the flavor profile is different. The accumulation of sugar is different. I mean, everything seems to be that it seems to really make sense to what we have heard for so many years, how vines should behave when they get to a certain age. Now, for the first time, you really start seeing them. I used to work with a vineyard in Chile that was 120 years old. It was an old Cabernet, own-rooted. And I was picking it at potential alcohol of 12.5, and it was full of flavors. So that was a big lesson for me, because I'd never done that before, and I did it for a few years, and the wines were stunning. And I realized that there's other elements out there, but it's not just for the heck of making it low alcohol. It's because the plants were metabolizing the sugars in a very different way, and the interesting aspect was the flavors that were revealed in that wine. So it's. I think that there's a lot to be said about old vines, that there's history in this part of the appellation that definitely there's a lot that can be revealed and understood and shared, hopefully shared.
Do you know what the clonal, did you say? What
It says clone 7, but that's what the maps say. But who knows? Yes. Who knows? Sam, I think that there's a little bit of Cabernet Franc here mixed up, and this, but who knows, man? I mean, I think that's, which I think is part of the mystery. Doesn't.
No, I mean, at some point it just becomes the Gold Ranch clone, right?
Correct.
Because it's the vines that have survived have adapted and evolved, and the Cab Franc just kind of becomes part of the mix without really being its own thing. It becomes the Gold Ranch clone.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, what year would you say this was planted?
72.
So it's a it
awesome.
satisfies the Historical Vineyard Society the Morgan Twain Peterson statement of the Antiquities Act has to be 50 years old, right?
Right.
So we made it.
Yeah. It's awesome.
And in some ways I'm glad that he could never sell it. Right. Because if somebody had bought it, they'd have ripped the vineyard out.
They would have called Phil Couturier, and Phil Couturier would have said, let's rip it out.
I mean, he's been looking at it for 40 years going, I'd really like to replant that vineyard.
It's a great property. And there's some sections that were never planted. Actually, the slope that faced Cayman, that's a very nice piece of land too. Yeah, and that's unplanted. Beautiful.
No, you could do. I mean, with a northern exposure like that, what you could do,
especially with climate change the way it's going, so it's a exposure for the future, right?
Bart, talking about that, I mean, I don't know how we will figure it out without allowing our vines to age. Yeah, with all the changes that we're seeing out there, I mean, I think that one of the biggest buffers are deep root systems, and if you don't have it, good luck, man. Yeah, good luck. That's gonna be tough.
Rodrigo, are you just making a cab and a chard?
Yes. So, something that I learned in the past was, and with Bart, we were very lucky to work with this gentleman as a consultant with David Ramey. Yep. And for me, I always admire him.
Yeah. And because he might be listening.
Yeah. And what I admire about Dave, I mean, he was very frank with us, and his comments were always very, very deep on how to do things better. But at the same time, when I learned about what he did on his personal level, was so focused that I admired a lot. I mean, it was a Chardonnay and a Cabernet, and that's how he started. And I thought, you know what? Let's keep it focused. It's very tempting to start doing vineyard designates or other varieties and other things.
To let Couturier talk you into buying some Grenache.
Yeah. It's a Grenache is the most is the biggest temptation now there. I mean, everybody wants to make a cool Grenache, and I think some people are achieving it. But for us, was like nobody needs another brand, another wine. And I think, hey, we got to keep it focused. We got to keep it focused and do it right, and hopefully become specialists about what we're doing in this appellation and work with the appellation to add value to what we're doing.
And what is the name Myrna?
Myrna is beloved in Latin.
Oh, okay.
Beloved.
You didn't know today was going to be a Latin lesson, Brian.
No, not at all.
I didn't either.
Yeah, Myrna is beloved, and we these sites invoke that a little bit. That you feel you're in a special place.
Yeah,
I like to say that it's because of my wife, but the truth is that it's because of the sites. Yeah.
And then it's
fission and fission because of the amount of fractures that you see in this property. It's full of rocks, and they're all cracked and in a very advanced stage of decomposition. From the top of the vineyard, you can see the bay, and you can see that there's a little bit of an influence over there, and the rocks are fully decomposed and crackling and breaking apart. So it's a very cool view.
It's more of, I mean, I don't know if you've been to my dad's house or where Muchas Piedras. You love that wine. Is that sort of fractured, crumbling volcanic tufa?
Yes.
Is that so? I mean, it's the same ridgeline, so that's the same sort of soil up there.
It is exactly right. Exactly right.
You don't have to get out there and pick this, do you? Do you get any input as to when it gets picked or when you get the fruit?
Of course.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, no, for sure. And it's this normally is an early site. It's definitely on the early side. And we don't want to let, the plants, they tell you when they're done, and in these sites normally they go a little bit earlier.
Especially when they're dry farmed.
Yeah, exactly.
And haven't been,
but they self-regulate. I mean, they
Right.
they know that, hey, this is, they're going to start falling apart at a certain point, and it's very different than the big muscles of young vineyards that they can cruise through a lot of difficulties.
Well,
This tends to have a shorter curve.
Right.
And Sam, your dad has always talked about, when these vines start to self-regulate, and would talk about like the vineyards he'd see in France and how they were so old, and they were obviously had started self-regulating themselves.
Right,
So we just all need to get there.
Yeah.
When we get older, we learn some regulation. I'm hoping, and some self-regulation.
That's what I hear.
But when you think about it, as we were talking about the pruners, and when you put that together with age, you prune to what they will be able to
Could
produce.
you imagine 50 years of that like pruning style on some of these young vineyards
that should be the benchmark.
right?
That's a benchmark. If we can get to manage like that and see vineyards like that, those will be gems in front of us.
The ones that Althea will be making wine from.
Yeah.
So, Rodrigo, what's the goal going forward? You want to make more wine? You just want to play around with some different stuff? You want to go back to Chile and do something back there after the kids are grown?
That's a tough one, Brian. But I think that for now, it's helped Fish and Myrna to be known, to position them out there, and in the future, we already start producing a couple of parcel wines or vineyard designates, and I'm very excited to get a couple of blocks from the Nunnery, which is farmed by Phil Cotturi, and from Montecillo and from Monterosso, which I think the three of them, I mean, the Nunnery it's an incredible property. I mean, it will show kind of what the acquired knowledge can do in a new developed property. I have tremendous expectations about that place. And Montecillo and Monterosso are a testament of the quality of this appellation of all Moon Mountain and what Moon Mountain can do at its best. I think that excites me. And one thing is to make wine from this place. Another thing is to really master the sites. And another thing will be to be consistent with the sites through time. So I think that we want to keep it very contained in that.
I wonder how, because we live here and we're looking at Moon Mountain every day.
Yeah.
But I really wonder outside of this area if people really understand Moon Mountain. And I know we do the Moon Mountain District tasting every year, but it seems like almost taking that show on the road would be.
Well, I mean, that's something that we've talked about. And it is, exciting for these wines to be out into the market, as opposed to, the DTC model that all of the sort of, benchmarks that exist in the appellation taken and were taken before the appellation became, a name that we could use, and didn't really change that because why would they?
Yeah.
So to your point, Brian, having these wines, out in the market in distribution, is going to be really important for people to learn, what it is and what these wines can be, because for sure, you taste these wines and if you've had the opportunity to taste Moon Mountain District wines like we have so much over the past 10 years, you go, well, yeah, that's Moon Mountain District Chardonnay. There's only a couple other places that I've tasted those flavors in Chardonnay. Yeah. And the Cabernet has that same thing of the ability to balance ripeness and acidity, being at that elevation and that intensity of those soils, but also having coastal influence, having marine influence off the bay, in a way that there's not a lot of places on planet Earth. And your point about it, an appellation based on geology and geography and not politics, and you get those types of
But to your point, Brian, I agree. I mean, we need to communicate that. Yeah, and that's has been the challenge in many aspects. As has been a challenge to communicate biodynamics as well. I mean, it has always been difficult. But I think it can be done. I think the beauty that this is an appellation that is restricted by its boundaries. It's not big. There's great people already in it.
Yeah.
There's not room for mega corporations as well, because they cannot scale whatever they do there. So I think it's set up to succeed. I still think we just need to figure it out to put this on the road, to communicate, to get to the SOM community, which are the loudest amplifier out there of situations like this one, and gain credibility with them so that we can really talk about our wines that are of very high quality and comparable to any other mountains from anywhere.
Yeah, you know, when you were in Atlanta, Marvella, one of the Psalms from Atlanta, was out here, and she was doing, it was like a week-long immersion program, but it was from the newest AVA. What do they call it? It's not West County, but it's West Sonoma Coast AVA. And they brought all these Psalms from all over the United States and brought them in. And
that's not a new practice. Like, people have done it, but it kind of fell out of favor, probably just the way the wine industry has and COVID. So they've done that for a couple of years now, I think. And it's a great way to, I listened to the podcast, like they were out in the vineyards tasting the wines, maybe from a couple of producers.
Yeah.
That's also something that I think is important for the education. Is I remember the first time going to IPNC and tasting these specific vineyards made by 5 different winemakers, to really kind of see that throughput of what the vineyard was or what the appellation was, and something that's probably not done enough here for whatever reasons. Yeah. So, I mean, that's the great thing about Rossi, the opportunity that we have to taste Grenaches from several vineyards. And, you know, they've been able to do it at Monte Rosa, and they've been able to do it at Montecillo, but there's a lot of times it's all, you know, winery owned and not let out of the bag.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, no, I mean, it's one of the challenges of the Moon Mountain District AVA is, you know, really some of the established standard bearer brands are allocated, you know, DTC only and don't get out there. They, you know, they want the name out there, and they're the people who are behind Moon Mountain District being an appellation in the first place. But it still benefits them. You know, they sell their wine and they sell out to their members. So it makes it hard to like get it out in the world. And spread the word.
And because, as you guys said, you know, it's only as big as it is anyway. So it's always going to be to some point limited.
Yeah, it is.
Well, we're going to make it a little bigger and add the Bald Mountain Chardonnay vineyard.
Right.
So we'll go stretch the lines a little.
How
bit.
do you feel like who would be able to make that decision? With a bunch of people
and grab some fences and go and walk it forward. Just walk north a little bit. You can petition. To change the lines.
Because how far north does the Moon Mountain AVA go?
We always would say Sugarloaf State, you know, State Park, and Bald Mountain. So you know, it clearly was just something that
was probably, as Rodrigo said, they either probably didn't want to support it in the beginning
when Christian Borcher was calling them.
Right.
Because to me, like Kundi is Mayacamas Mountain Range west-facing elevation, right? But they're not considered.
No, they are.
But they have
the entire property.
Not the entire property from
400 feet
400 feet elevation up.
Okay.
Which is, you know, even
a third of the property.
I was going to say,
way
up the mountain.
Up
their vineyard.
Because isn't that available right now?
So, no.
Giant question mark.
Well, no, but you're also there's 2 different entities there. Okay, there's the Kundi Winery, which has property around it that's owned by the Vintage Wine Estate.
It's owned by some creditors,
right,
and some stalking horse bids.
And then there's there's Wildwood Vineyards, which is farmed by Keith Kundi, and that is all the surrounding property. If you look on the map, it's very, very different. And so, is there fruit available? I got a list from Keith Kundi. There's a lot of fruit available, depending on what you want. You know, so
but they are not necessarily organically farmed, right? That entire property?
That property is not organically farmed.
Right. So that would be a huge piece of the ultimate goal going forward is make Moon Mountain AVA the first 100% organic.
I think that would be a beautiful thing.
Right. And this is kind of the opportunity, right? If this is...
Well, again, I mean, there you have to convince Keith Cundy to start farming it. You know, the Cundy family owns that, and that's not available, as we were joking about.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the piece that might be available might be where the winery is and the bottomlands.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah. And you know where they do the weddings on the top of the hill.
And they have cows. They got a bunch of cows up there at some point. Yeah. Yeah.
It's a big ranch.
Yeah, no, it's huge.
It's beautiful.
They have to be the major in terms of acreage, right?
I think Monte Rosa probably
is. Monte Rosa bigger? It just seems like when you're driving north to south, it seems like a lot more property.
Bigger acreages, yeah.
But in Moon Mountain District?
Oh, well, no. Moon Mountain
Monte Rosa is 600.
Yeah.
I think it's massive.
It's 300. It's like 280, 300 planted.
Planted, yes. And
so you've obviously met the new vineyard manager at Monte Rosa?
No, I have not. I was with Brenna until I was talking to her, and we have exchanged emails with the new person, but we have not met yet.
Who is it?
I don't know.
Nobody knows.
Oh,
it's a big mystery.
So maybe there is no person.
No, there's definitely got to be a person.
Okay,
it's a big property, and it's you know, things look good. I mean, they've been farming it very well. So
well, and even
Renee's team, I mean, they were great when she got there, and
right,
she only made them better, especially with their march towards organic certification
right.
and better farming.
Yeah, there's some people that have been there 20, 30 plus years that have been farming that vineyard that are still farming it. But I just wonder who's
beautiful
decision makers.
So Rodrigo, how do people find Far Mountain? Put on my hat now.
On the webpage, definitely we have been. It took us a while to get that card functioning, and over here.
Why is that?
Well, it's a lot of regulations. Yeah, a lot of regulations, but it's great to go through the process as well. Man, you learn so many things that are not related to what we do, but and we're in a few restaurants in Napa. My expectation is that obviously as I spend more time in Sonoma myself and start seeing the wine in different places in Sonoma too.
Oh, you guys just the other day were at a restaurant doing a staff tasting. They were pouring by the glass. It was
at the slanted door.
At the slanted door.
How do you know that, Brian? That's great.
We have friends in the industry.
Yeah. That is.
This is the new slanted door in Napa?
In Napa, yeah. It was, and with we're by the glass there and by the bottle has been a great placement, and really appreciate. And it's the Chardonnay, and it fits really nice with the food.
Yeah, for sure.
So
any of you that work at a restaurant or a hotel and want the wine, RNDC, the Estates Group,
correct,
has the wines as well.
Exactly. So,
which is probably how I found it. For the Fairmont.
Yeah.
Joni Boots.
Joni Boots, but she's now the sort of import specialist. So I think Keith Lindstrom maybe is the guy that you reach out to.
And the other states that you're in, people out there listening?
Yeah, we're definitely in mostly all over the country. I mean, different in small quantities, obviously, but mostly in Texas. We have a good presence in New York. We have some presence in Florida, definitely, and in Chicago as well. So it's been we're starting to get it.
If you're out there, look for it.
Yeah,
ask for it. Yeah,
buy it, order it online.
Mm-hmm.
I love Texas, man. Can I just say, they love wine. They love to come out and visit.
Yep.
They seem to have money to spend on wine. They're like the best consumers. I mean, we should try and figure out some sort of Moon Mountain in Texas. Would be like the most bang for your buck.
We should.
I mean,
we should Texas tour.
Yeah.
All right. One last
Dallas,
thing, Rodrigo.
Houston, Austin.
Yeah.
The artist.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
Tom Killian.
What a score.
Tom Chilean, it's
famous artist label.
you know,
jealous of Tom Chilean.
good. Can I tell you a little story about Tom? Tom he's a local artist. Do you know him?
I've met him a couple times. He's out in Inverness.
In Inverness, exactly.
Had some open studios.
So this year, so the art that he does is incredible because he sketched the vineyard. In this case, he's a big fan of outdoors. He sketched it, he carved it in wood, and then he stamped it in paper. Tom, he has made such a good interpretation of the sites, and they kind of pop out from the label, which are very, very exciting. But I'll tell you what excited us the most was that this year we decided that we need to see national parks with my family. So we went to Zion, to Bryce, earlier in the year, which was incredible. That's a whole another story, but what incredible places. And then we spent some time in Yosemite, and we really enjoy our stay there. The last day we went to the store to get something out of there, and of course Ansel Adams dominated the walls and the pictures, but the only other artist that was there in the store was Tom Chilean with his portraits. I was almost, it gave me chills because I thought, wow, that's incredible. What a person connected to nature, and what an incredible place where to be. I was blown away by all those places.
Tom Chilean's art for me centers around Mount Tam.
Right.
Yes.
And the thing about the Moon Mountain District is it connects to Mount Tam. It's this straight line, this sort of like visual frame. So to have Tom Chilean, it's
I feel like it close to the same elevation too, right?
Probably from the top of the Moon Mountain to the top of Mount Tam's probably pretty close.
He knows all the places.
He knows all the
places.
It's just like, Ada Limon actually reached out to me. She's back in Sonoma, and we had her on. We talked about the terroir of poetry. Tom Chilean's art is rooted in Mount Tam. So to have that, make that connection in the through line and tie it all in, it's fucking dope.
Yeah.
Again, Stanley Mass is on our labels, and I'm Tom Chilean would be like the only other artist I could ever possibly imagine. Yeah, totally.
Wow. And we're now back on this shard. This is both Rodrigo, the wines are great.
The wines are great. The Chardonnay is the better breakfast wine.
It's a little early, but definitely.
Yeah.
Thank you guys, and thank you for tasting and for inviting me to your show. This is fantastic, and I'm sure we will be doing things together in the future. So I really appreciate it.
Look forward to that.
Yeah, before we started recording, right, we had some potential fruit sales going on right at the back door here.
Tis the season, man. Tis the season. Especially this year, we just like find every back door to sell some fruit out of there.
Hey, you looking for some Chenin?
Yeah, right.
Hey, man, meet me in the parking lot. We'll buy some Chenin Blanc.
Yeah, totally. It's very Sonoma.
Yeah. All right,
Bart, are you? I saw your friend Oprah Winfrey at the Democratic National Convention. She didn't mention your Chenin that night, but she had a different agenda going on. She was talking about joy,
which is basically the same thing.
Which is basically Chenin is joy, right? It's funny. I friend of the pod, Elton Sloan. From Robert Craig.
Yeah.
He posted a picture, and it was some Chenin Blanc that they picked.
They have a vineyard on Wall Road, by the way.
Oh, yeah. And it's some Chenin that they picked that they had tea-budded over from Cabernet.
Whoa.
And I'm like, Elton, there's a story there.
Yeah, what's going on?
Someone who's listening to the show.
Right. So what were you saying, Brian?
I was just wondering what you were up to right now. You waiting on some fruit to be delivered here in the next
month? When I get done here, I'm going to call Alex Benward up at Beltane Ranch and see what's going on there.
Yeah,
and
getting pretty close on that Sauv Blanc.
Yep. And then this Chenin Blanc thing, trying to figure that out. Being totally upfront, we're playing it pretty conservative this year, just because I got behind a little bit in my bottling for whatever reason. So I have inventory,
Yeah.
And so I'm just playing a little conservative this year. So definitely getting fruit, but and trying to get some stuff bottled. So tasting rooms, it's amazing because I have to bottle now because I'm running out of wine.
Yeah.
So thank you to all of you people coming to the tasting room. It's working.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's remarkable when you kind of get down and go,
Oh shit.
Yeah, I have like 4 cases of Malbec left.
Yeah, you start having to take inventory.
You finally gonna raise the price on that freaking wine? You should make it a reserve wine now and charge $150 a bottle for the last 4 cases. $100 for you podcast listeners.
Right.
And how are your roommates doing? Your Steve and Jamie?
They're I know they're both not listening, so let's just break it down.
Yeah.
Steve is getting his first grapes tomorrow, some Pinot from Bennett Valley. Jamie and he both have grapes scheduled for next week, so I don't know if that's more Pinot for Steve. It's definitely Pinot for Jamie. And so yeah, those guys are ready to roll.
Yeah.
We need something to happen because they're both getting a little there are winemakers that when they don't have enough to do and it's there, they get tense,
idle hands.
Like, should we clean this again? No, it's already clean.
Right.
It's not just use water to waste water.
Rearrange some barrels.
Right. Go walk through the vineyard again.
No, stay out of the vineyard.
That's what I've not been able to do enough. Is that, but this year, but yeah, I have a senior in high school now, so
I'll make him go walk some vineyards.
Yeah, no,
Yeah, right.
Want him to. He's got a full schedule right now, so keep studying, Dane. Not that he's listening either. So yeah, So come to make an appointment at the tasting tank
During harvest.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
for sure. So what about you guys? Isn't it time for another party?
Yeah, I guess so.
We're always partying.
Well, we had 3 winemaker dinners coming up from 4 so Beach Chalet. Oh yeah, right. Now we haven't even talked about that.
I'm going to talk about that.
Okay, so if you know the Beach Chalet restaurant in San Francisco, they have a couple other restaurants. So we are doing winemaker dinners at all 3 of them coming up in September.
So winemaker dinner near you. Beach Chalet, Lake Chalet in Oakland, and then a new property.
That's the one I can't remember.
Mill Valley. That's really awesome, but we can't remember the name.
Yeah.
But
I'm sure if you just go to Beach Chalet's website, it's probably got all the info on there. Yeah. And then you want to talk about Grenache Day? We're getting
Grenache Day is coming. It's the most important day of the year, Rodrigo.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
International Grenache Day is September 20th, the 3rd Friday in September, and we're gonna do a sort of like some takeover at Baker and Cook. I did at one point last year and put a bunch of different renditions of Grenache on the menu paired with Nick Demarest's food. It'll be casual, make a reservation, regular, not a formal wine dinner, but sort of a takeover kind of one. And then October 6th, we got something coming. Cooking details soon. If you're listening, we probably have the wine that Phil sent me letter out. Check your email box.
Yeah, just got a call this morning when Rodrigo showed up, a guy saying, "Hey, I need to change my credit card. I'm excited to get the wines." Make
sure your credit cards are updated, your addresses. Email Jasmine. She's sitting there patiently waiting for the inundation of changes.
We tried all the wines the other day. We got some fun stuff. So
baller lineup.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, we had good feedback on the No on J measure.
Yes.
I think there's probably been more dairymen and poultry farmers that have listened to the podcast than ever before.
God, go back and listen to some other episodes.
Right, exactly.
There's some other good stuff.
Well, we need Bronte to be doing some marketing for us.
Oh, put Bronte in everything.
Yeah.
She was awesome. Bronte Edwards. Yeah. Vote no on J. The only J to say no to.
Right.
Measure
That's
J.
right. That was a classic Sam line.
I've been workshopping that one.
All right. Rodrigo, thank you very much.
Thank you,
a
guys.
successful harvest.
Yeah, same to you guys.
Yeah,
Thank you
we're
for
there.
having me. Yeah.
The wine
Appreciate it.
go out there and look for him before Brian drinks all the Chardonnay.
I'm taking this cab too, so I don't know about. Yeah, I'm a Moon Mountain Sonoma cab drinker now. Didn't say that 2 years ago, but it's definitely. I mean, this is my jam. Yeah, everything on this side.
All right, subscribe, review, tell your friends,
Smash that like
but
button.
only the cool ones.
Oh, and remember, if you want to sponsor us with new podcast equipment, reach out to Winery 16600. Ask for Sam.
No, it's winemakerspod@gmail.com.
Oh, we have an email?
Yeah.
Who answers that?
Podfathers. I've been checking it.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, the Podfather sent that out. We also have Google phone too.
Speaking of sponsors, the DTC Wine Symposium early bird tickets.
Right.
See us down there in Monterey in January 2025. The Real Project 2025 DTC Symposium in Monterey.
Yeah, that's right. You're going to be on for like a week, so you're going to be at Eco Farm and then
DTC Symposium, Eco Farm. They moved the entire conference for me,
just so you didn't have to switch hotels or Airbnbs. Okay,
Thank
cool.
goodness.
January 21st, 22nd, 23rd at the Hyatt Regency in Monterey. Go to, is it DTC.com?
I can go to freethegrapes.com. That's probably the easiest one to remember.
It used to be freethegrapes.org. Now is it freethegrapes.com?
.org. Just Google Free the Grapes.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is why we don't have sponsors.
Send us a podcast equipment with whatever you want us to read. Thanks for listening, everyone.